the interstellar research vessel Irv was truly a sight to behold. Over 500 feet from bow to stern, the sleek silver craft boasted an array of sensor equipment, communications arrays, and experimental propulsion systems never before seen. At the core of the ship was the pride and joy of the captain and crew, the dimensional drive. This revolutionary engine promised to bend space-time itself, allowing humanity to explore the farthest reaches of the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Captain Steve Jones reviewed the pre-flight checklist one final time. He was a sturdy man in his late 40s, his hair just beginning to show streaks of distinguished gray at the temples. As a veteran test pilot and engineer, he had been hand-selected to command this mission. He would put the Irv through her paces and make history by carrying out the first extra-dimensional jump drive test. 10 years into its deep space voyage, Irv was over 50 light-years from Earth when it came time to engage the dimensional drive. While still well within their home galaxy, they were venturing farther than any human explorers to date, thanks to the miracle of cryostasis keeping the crew alive all this time. They had arrived at the predetermined test site, a little, studied globular star cluster on the outskirts of the Milky Way. All stations report readiness for dimensional shift. Jones ordered over the ship's comm system. Responses of green and ready filtered in from all departments. The captain nodded, steeling himself before initiating the irreversible jump sequence. Here goes nothing. Engaging in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Jones activated the drive controls. Blinding blue-white light emanated from vents along the hull. It coalesced into a shimmering aura around the Irv, and suddenly the entire vessel seemed to stretch and blur. Space itself warped wildly, whipping past at impossible speeds. Klaxon alarms sounded as radiation counts spiked to alarming levels. "Status," barked the captain. The helmsman, Ensign Vlasic, was working frantically to stabilize their course. "Navigational systems are blind, sir. The drive is operating beyond design parameters, feeding back into local space-time." "Shut it down." "I've tried already. We don't have control. If I force a shutdown, we risk being stranded." The ship groaned as gravimetric forces outside the dimensional barrier threatened to tear it apart. Suddenly, with an almost painful snap, the rupture in space sealed itself. The Irv drifted silently in empty blackness. The stars, the galaxy itself, gone without a trace. Jones gasped. "My God! Where are we?" The sensor officer, Lieutenant Bajwa, peered into her displays. "I'm not reading any celestial bodies or stellar features, Captain. No gamma radiation, solar winds. As far as I can tell, we're not in normal space anymore." A deathly silence fell over the bridge as the reality sunk in. They had successfully tested the dimensional drive, seemingly too well. It had flung them out of their universe altogether into some null space between realities. Were they even still alive? Could this just be some strange fragmented hallucination as their atoms were shredded during an uncontrolled jump? No one wanted to voice the horrific thoughts aloud. "Send a distress call on all channels and frequencies," Jones finally said. "Not that there's anyone out here to receive it. Bajwa, work with engineering to recalibrate navigation and find me something. Anything. To get a sensor lock on." Over the next several desperate hours, the crew slowly detected spatial discontinuities and microscopic singularities swirling in the void around their vessel. It was as if the very fabric of existence had been torn open and haphazardly stitched back together. The dimensional drive had warped Irv into some interdimensional limo. "At least the ship is stable for now, and life support is solid," Jones sighed. "But we're way outside our mission parameters. I need options, people." Lieutenant Cower, the youthful mission systems analyst, hesitantly spoke up. Sir, I have a wild idea. When the dimensional drive activated, it registered a massive energy spike off all measured scales before shutting back down automatically. But what if we could manually trigger it to open another controlled rupture? What exactly are you proposing, Lieutenant? Jones asked with an eyebrow raised. Here is a 1502-word continuation of the sci-fi story. Lieutenant Cower tapped at a display screen showing power fluctuations during the test. I believe when we initiated the dimensional shift, the drive tore a hole not just through space, but through spatial dimensions themselves. We didn't travel faster than light. We slipped perpendicular to the universe we know. She highlighted an enormous spike in the readings. As you can see, the ship channeled a truly impossible amount of energy for a fraction of a second. If we can trigger even a tiny controlled burst targeting the singularities out there, I think we may be able to slip back into normal space. Murmurs rippled through the bridge. What she proposed was nearly suicidal, and dependent on a string theory most thought purely hypothetical. But stranded in the abyss, did they have another choice? Captain Jones studied the nervous young physicist intently. Her deep brown eyes showed resolve and confidence in the radical proposal. Can we control when and where this hypothetical breach would open? I believe so, sir, Cower responded. Sensors indicate several larger singularities within range. We can use the dimensional engine to tear one open, creating a gateway in its event horizon back to our universe. With some precise calculations, I can plot a course through it. The captain weighed their options. Dwindling supplies versus the minuscule but real chance of success through madness. All right, Lieutenant. Coordinate with engineering to prepare a manual activation sequence for my command. He ordered, let's see if we can't bend the universe to our will. Over the next tense 36 hours, the crew recalibrated the drive and plotted emergency trajectories through spatial rifts indicated by sensor ghosts on the very edge of detection. The ship trembled with uncanny vibrations as electromagnetic fields danced wildly in the quantum foam, enveloping them. Finally, all was prepared. On my mark, trigger dimensional breach in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark, shouted Captain Jones. Cower slammed down the activation override. A violent lurch threw the crew violently as micro-singularities flashed open and closed wildly around the Irv. Klaxons sounded as radiation alarms squealed. Maintain bearing 220 Mark 7 as we discussed. Guide us through, Lieutenant, Jones barked. Aye, sir, coordinating breach vector. Cower's fingers deftly guided swirling torrents of energy toward a seething rupture in space. Time dead ahead. The Irv plunged through the event horizon as space itself dilated wildly, engulfing them. In a blinding flash, the dimensional barrier burst open, spitting the vessel out into a wholly unexpected realm beyond comprehension. The surreal new spatial dimension defied reason and sanity. Swirling hues of hyperluminous colors and patterns unlike anything perceivable engulfed the Irv. Readings on sensors flickered and warped as expected natural laws of physics collapsed. Space seemed to curve back upon itself recursively. Several crew members retched violently as their senses rebelled. The ship's navigation systems could make no sense of incoming data. Captain Jones checked forward visuals and external cameras with morbid fascination. Space had somehow flattened, lacking depth or perspective when viewed relative to the exploratory craft. It was like the universe had been peeled open, dimensionally speaking, to reveal a secret existence beyond the familiar four-dimensional space-time they understood. What is this nonsensical realm? Gasped Dr. Surrey, the mission's lead physicist who helped design the flawed drive currently exceeding its clearly limited understanding of hyperspace. Her mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the measurements streaming in. "You're the experts. Any theories?" Jones asked. "If these readings can be believed," Surrey muttered, "we've entered or perhaps collided with the second dimension, like a planar existence theorized but never before observed." Lieutenant Cower's eyes went wide as she grasped the hypothetical concepts now surrounding them. "You mean like a purely two-dimensional spatial manifold, with height and width defining existence, but no depth, lacking fundamental perspective or distance?" She pointed at the screen. "It would explain the bizarre visual distortions around us. Space and time have literally flattened as we perceive it. We're still able to interact physically, it seems, but according to this, we have infinite depth, relatively speaking. The Earth floated bemused within an electric kaleidoscope sea." Dazed, Captain Jones could barely speak. "Can you plot any readings allowing navigation? Will the dimensional drive still work here?" Reams of nonsensical data flooded sensor arrays and navigation systems. Each effort to engage propulsion or chart a course failed. There seemed no escape from the surreal planner trap. Defeated, Dr. Surrey shook her head angrily. "None of this makes any logical sense. We've already triggered the drive beyond safety limits, risking catastrophic structural failure across space-time. I fear one more attempt could shatter our connection with any base physical reality altogether." As if responding to her dire warnings, the vessel suddenly lurched without warning. Here is a 1502-word conclusion to the sci-fi story. Alarms blared as the deck plating shuddered beneath the crew's feet. The glow of the second dimension glitched oddly, as if reality itself were digitizing into pixels and reconstituting repeatedly. That last jump has created systemic instability. We're in grave danger of losing structural cohesion. Lol Kayar yelled over the cacophony of alerts. Captain Jones gripped his command chair tensely as the bridge continued to vibrate. "Go to emergency stance Bravo. Seal all airtight compartments and prepare for possible hull breaches. The trained crew leapt into action exasper protocols. As abruptly as it started, the violent quaking ceased. An eerie silence fell, the previous background hum of engines and electronics now absent. Jones checked nervously with each station for system status reports. "Main power is offline, sir," Ensign Vlasic called out, reading multiple failures across secondary systems as well. "Oh no!" Kyer gasped, her face falling as diagnostic data poured in. "The dimensional barrier is collapsing. Space-time is literally disintegrating around us. I'm registering chronoton flux and cascading quantum flux and cascading quantum decoherence." She whirled to face the captain, her eyes filled with despair. "At this rate of dissolution, we've got 15 minutes, 20 tops before total atomic deconstruction." Dr. Surrey jumped in angrily. "I warned you this might happen. We've stretched hyperspatial geometry past any stable configurations. Now the forces we unleashed are shredding our last connections to base reality." Jones absorbed this with stoic calm. Though inwardly his thoughts raced, outwardly he remained steady, drawing on every last reserve of unflappable leadership. Their only hope lay in rapidly untested theories few comprehended. But underlying it all was his faith in the remarkable crew before him. Together, they would accomplish the impossible or die trying. Clasping his hands behind his back, chin held high, Jones addressed his team. "Listen up. We have drilled countless crisis scenarios. Now we face reality itself turning against us. By damn, we are going to best it." He locked eyes with Cower and Dr. Surrey. "You two are the finest scientific minds I know. If anyone can pull our fat from the fire, it's you. Now put those big brains together and get our engines back online." Kaur responded immediately, her analytical intellect kicking into high gear. "The dimensional barrier is still permeable, though collapsing rapidly. If we can channel that flux, we may bypass damaged systems to trigger an emergency reboot of the dimensional engine. Theoretically, it could work," Dr. Suri conceded grudgingly. She was as arrogant as she was brilliant, but refused to allow petty rivalry to blind her now. "We must cross. Wire the main deflector array to emit an inverse chronometric pulse. That should nullify localized entropy and reboot core systems." Captain Jones grinned fiercely. "Now that's the can do spirit. Make it so fast as you can." In a flurry of activity, the two scientists worked alongside engineering crews directing emergency power shunts. The ship shuddered ever more violently as minute fractures multiplied across the second-dimension landscape still surrounding them. With mere minutes left until the V shook itself to pieces, Kaur slammed an activation switch, rerouting the last of their power reserves. "Chronometric pulse initiated. Here's hoping this affirms existence enough for system restart." A resonant hum permeated the dying vessel. Like a wave of stability flowing outward, sections began flickering back to life. "It's working," the captain bellowed. "It's working," the captain bellowed. "Helm, get ready to re-initialize propulsion on my mark. Let's prep a jump back home." As the V slowly rebooted, the crew hurried to prep emergency navigation protocols using the bizarre physics of the planar realm against itself. Space seemed to contract and distend chaotically outside, ensnaring the ship at its center. "The pulse was only temporary," Kaur warned nervously. "We should have just minutes now before the cascade effect resumes." Taking a deep breath, Jones gave the order to seal their fate one way or another. "Initiate emergency dimensional shift. Back the way we came in. Maximum power to shields and inertial damping." The groaned, reality warping wildly as it plunged once more through a shimmering rift torn by its own damaged drive systems. Violently bucking, the exploratory vessel punched its way through layer after layer of increasingly familiar dimensional barriers. Klaxons continued blaring as the hull temperature neared critical, then suddenly went silent along with all lighting as power failed again. With a stomach-churning lurch, the hurtled out of hyperspace, skidding violently into normal space-time once again. Captain Jones clenched his restraints dizzily, blinking against a familiar sight. Distant stars, nebulae. They had made it home, or some reasonable facsimile. As emergency teams initiated critical system repairs, Jones staggered onto unsteady feet. Against all odds, his intrepid crew had seized victory from certain doom. Together they had survived the impossible. Gazing with pride around the battered bridge filled with cheering survivors, he allowed himself a wide grin of triumph. Someday the tale of the would become legend, but for now, there was data to collect and discoveries to be made. After all, no one would ever believe half of what transpired without evidence. Their incredible story was just beginning. Wherever the whims of exploratory science took them next, dimensional barriers breach or no, this crew would shine gloriously among the eternal stars.